you very much. Thank you, Neville, for having us here. JPE Design Studio is where I work, and in doing some buildings at Lot 14, we work very closely with D Squared here as well, who've already spoken. I guess part of that is working here. We looked at changing some old hospital buildings. I think everyone here must know the old Ra Hospital. And when that decided that was moving, I think there was a bit of uproar, I guess, about building a whole new hospital somewhere else. But I think there was a lot of opportunity as well in reusing what was there. So that's what we really got onto. And I think we've probably worked on two major builds, one being Allied Health, which was just like here as well, was an old administration building originally, and with the goal and the aim to turn into a 6-star rated startup hub for emerging entrepreneurs. There was another building adjacent to this that I'll just touch on lightly as well, McEwen Building, which was also on the site, which we worked with D Squared as well, and we've actually done a few fit outs to a few of the other buildings on site. So so here there were 6 heritage buildings, kind of just located kind of just on the corner here of Frome and North Terrace, and the strategic vision to like reinvent the area into a leading entrepreneurial hub and showcase art, workplace, and embrace wellness and sustainability. So I guess at the time for this one, our main bit was adaptive reuse, and that's actually what I'm going to touch on here as well. And also just connection back to the Botanic Gardens. So the site was a hospital since 1855, and the Allied Health building, which is this one, and the main picture here, was built in 1932. And also just one back a bit more, which we also worked on, which is the McEwen building, was about in mid-1940s. It's kind of the poorer cousin, I guess, or brother of the buildings. Being after the war, unfortunately, materials in that building and kind of the heritage craftsmanship was lacking a little bit. There is still some, but we'll show you kind of two very different approaches in the adaptive reuse here. Kind of here, a little fun fact at the bottom, in the Allied Health building, a film crew used it for a zombie movie shoot, and was also used for special forces for tactical training, because literally inside was room on room on room, on doors, on corridors. There was no vision of outside, even where we have windows. The building is full of windows, but yet when you stepped inside, you were lucky to see one, because this is the way it was used. I guess turning into hospital, it grew over time ad hoc. It needed to keep up with the population. This was the hospital, I guess, for South Australia. It just happened. So there was no real strategic planning for that. And I guess the whole idea here of health and well-being, sustainability, was not a particular high importance, but that's what we changed. So this was a better room in the hospital. And I say that pretty convincingly, because this one was at least open to a point. But as you can see here, little details as well, is the ceiling is suspended, but most of the ceilings inside these buildings, similar to this in some ways, especially the upper levels, but also were 4 meters high. These are 2.4, because by the time they put mech in over time, the windows you can see are kind of already covered over. This one was Allied Health. McEwen was probably worse again, but it was all just covered, built in, materials were just put on. So the challenge was, how could we reuse this? So for Allied Health, it was smaller, so the footprint we just kind of cleaned up and took out. McEwen was kind of internally gut. There's not much internally apart from the structure that was left. Challenges, I guess, was to have the new use for this was to have multiple stakeholders from government, private sectors, and startups. So how do we get all these people in this one building? I guess project objectives here were broken down into 8. The focus was sustainability, flexible and agile workplaces, maximising natural light. So that was a huge change to say. And I think looking at kind of how this is done right here, very similar, just how could we get light into these buildings, especially Allied Health has a basement, which has light wells all around it, all covered up. So we try to bring them back into use, get light down. And while there is lighting in here, there is a lot of natural light that actually comes in here now almost from every side, which didn't have back in the day, because these were just rooms on rooms. So we also wanted to create connective and diverse spaces, and that was internally and externally. We didn't do the landscape personally. Our office was not involved in the landscape, but the two buildings are adjacent to each other, and we looked at how we could promote the connection and use of both buildings for the same tenants or different tenants, but we could use it. So this space can actually be used by anyone. We could have this presentation there right now as well, kind of thing. So it can be reused. So this is kind of a little section from North Terrace, kind of looking north. So basement again, workspaces. The ground floor level is actually mostly a kitchen, which is one main kitchen, and the idea of that was to get flexibility and get people moving and an atmosphere. So also we weren't doubling up on, or more than that, but having kitchens everywhere. There's little tea points and bits and pieces, but we wanted this little community within this building. And the idea is we can get the next building also flowing into this building. So we can literally have this kind of thing happening with multiple people. Upper level, flexible meeting spaces again. Most of this building's filled up with startups, so between kind of 2 and 10 people all together, and providing those rooms of flexibility without every office, every person needing that themselves, so we can just share, which is the main thing. And then also we had to be also very strategic in the way of having some privacy, because people are developing, they're coming up with their own IP that they do need to share. But most people in this building are kind of all there for the same thing, is kind of to research and push themselves somewhere and push the state somewhere. So they're really all, I think, quite supportive. These are kind of some of the glamour shots of what you see when we start demo. But one thing that we use some of these images just to show, like, you know, windows at the back. That's north facade there, was just built up. There was another building on it. So when these were little kind of finds, we didn't actually know those windows were there until we started pulling down kind of walls on top. So it's trying to access bits. That's actually the other side of it. So the two central ones are actually the internal and external sides. But this was pretty hard, because when we got over the site, this building, there's a few images coming up, was contained and surrounded on 3 of the 4 sides. So we took an approach with Renew USA to work through about just like taking all of that away, all the things that were kind of done in the 80s and onwards to get rid of, and just go back to the original buildings. So that was on both the Allied Health and McEwen. But even with this one, so that's actually Allied Health there, McEwen building here, with a 2-story extension that was done in the 60s, I think it was. But it made the floor plate very wide and very deep, and there was no natural light coming down from those, especially the 2 lower levels, because the buildings next to it were still of decent height and proximity. So we actually did demo that and then reopen all the balconies. All the balconies were enclosed. They were turned into little offices. So we actually went back to getting rid of all of those. And on the western side, which is actually, at least once it gets in the sun in the afternoon, is covered by the adjacent building, is all full height glazing. And now most of that footprint gets natural light happening. So that was some big moves. So really taking back to the original and just like owning the structure and the original thoughts. So Allied Health was a big one here, was also trying to restore the original entrance, which was hidden and developed over time. So the pink's kind of what was there when we got the site. We demoed it and then returned it to actually a multi-use community space, outdoor and indoor. It has, the top is a deck, which can have they have like mini movie nights, talks, discussions. Inside the link bridge connecting the 2 buildings is actually multi-purpose rooms, meeting rooms, collaboration space. So that's actually a very public section of the building. And then obviously people do tend to walk. That's kind of the main avenues currently on the site that connects kind of the north and south of the site. So a little bit of the floor plate for Allied Health here. As you can see, most of the walls, all the dark is the original walls. So it is still very contained and small inch, but there's a lot of glass now between the layers of walls. And our new build and new walls are only very small, and that's mostly for wet areas. So it's actually very much open plan. There is meeting rooms and glass, but as you can say, it's still pretty flexible. The ground floor is probably, which is the top one over here, the big shared kitchen, the big auditorium kind of space in the middle, and just shared spaces and meeting rooms all around for collaboration. The McEwen building, as I mentioned earlier, was completely contained in. So we actually removed a lot of building around. And most of it was actually transient space. It was the reception space to get up and down. So it wasn't actually, there was no real thought, there was no process, there was no reasoning for it in the way of reuse in that sense. We'd rather go back to the original heritage fabric of the building. We also looked at, we've got on the top of this building now is a kind of, it's quite a large plant room, but that plant room is actually to help connect all kind of 3 buildings in the future. So we're trying to minimize as well plant rooms for every building and the type that that's done. So this one does a lot of work and it hooks into one other thermal plant on site. So between the 2 plants, we can, I think we're connecting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 5 of the buildings. So I think that's a great kind of achievement in that. I think if we were to do it today again, we'd probably get even more efficiencies out of it and think of maybe even better ways of doing certain elements, but at least that was a big push and, you know, and it's successful in that manner. So as you can see, before we started, Green Star unrateable, neighbours was 3. Then in 2018 when we started and we got, I think that was design, we're at 5 stars and neighbours at 5.5, and now we're actually Green Star 6 star and Neighbours Energy 6 star. I think it was actually one of the first 6 star adaptive reuse heritage buildings. And I think, so that was for the one on the left, and I think McEwen's actually pretty much the same now. I think it was very similar. So yeah, great outcome in the end. And both from a reuse and adaptability and sustainable from the life cycle and economy of people inside. I think the wellness is, I can't even tell you the rate of growth for people inside and how much better it is from what was there. I don't even understand how it was a hospital, to be honest. How it was actually a hospital, how people went to this space and were told to get better kind of thing, because just mentally you weren't going to be better in there. Now it is, I believe. That's my opinion anyway, but I think it is. But also the public nature given back to this building is, while there is still commercial and it's still businesses, most of this you can still go into now. I think, you know, there are certain barriers here and there for certain people and clients, I guess, but I think at least the opportunity to go in, most of McEwen, most of Allied Health, you can still go in. And I mean, now we've got the Australian Space Discovery Centre down the bottom, which is very prominent now. But just, yeah, the connection and the new opportunity of people in there and actually the environment and space around, I think is pretty amazing. These are just some images, so of both the buildings that look quite nice, but I guess some little takeouts from the buildings. Air permeability test back in April, 27.04 to September 9.73. So it's from an air pressurization and leakage 3 times better than where it was before. And this is a heritage building, and this is so, you know, where we didn't have to touch, we didn't. So original windows in as many places as we could. Original openings, but obviously there was areas where we did improve. There's asbestos and other things we had to deal with as we went along, but really trying to say, well, you know what, you can do it. You can actually get the existing to work as much as you can. And I guess there's little hidden things like this little tile detail was actually original, and it wraps around the whole perimeter of the building. We just found these things weren't originally like kind of, they were hidden and stuff, and when we took stuff off the walls, that was underneath, and we decided, you know, that's actually a pretty cool little detail. It gives some character to it, and, you know, trying to find it. So, you know, we just tried to discover what was already there, rediscover, should I say. Collaboration, so going from lighting systems, integrated sound controls, sensors, daylight, so, you know, we're not just relying on what was there before, but trying to improve as much as we can. Maximise natural light. This was pretty big, I think, for them. This was that kind of western facade I was showing of the McEwen building now, which is like mostly, this was level 1, so we just had to have fire suppression, but there is how much natural light's coming into here before. We've tried to leave as much exposed underside of slabs as possible. This was a pretty cool building because, strangely enough, every floor, every slab was different. They weren't constructed in the same way almost on every floor. So that was pretty interesting as we got, but it took us some work and consultation with the client, Renew SA, to go, hey, I don't think you need plasterboard ceilings everywhere. We don't have to have clean everywhere. And I don't think this is why you're coming to this building or this location. So this was kind of some of the outcomes we had. Of the one is exposing as much as possible. Allied, this is a little pop-out space. So if you went to the northern side of the buildings, if you kind of went in, there's little glass pop-outs on every one. These are just to let natural light in, but also have just those little breakout moments where you don't actually need a room. You're just taking a phone call. You're just having a quick discussion. You're thinking you might just be with a colleague sitting there and having a little chat, and then you go back. So we didn't have to make a whole nother room. Sustainable, materials, and I guess the core here, the future recycled water connection. So the 2 points there is obviously we're trying to use as much as the building as possible. We only removed what we had to, and probably also what was not sustainable in the way of materials in the building. So we're actually taking away those. But we didn't, as I said, we didn't do the landscape, but we're ready to connect up to the site-wide recycled water connection, and I believe that's all done now. So that's how we're getting to our 6-star now. And then just some other building fabric. So we tried to really actually bring back the honesty of the original material. And as I said, like another ceiling, another different type that's currently getting a fit out now, this level, and that's still exposed, just painted out, which is pretty amazing. And some of the natural light and views we're getting from these same levels. So this is actually same level, just one's looking east and one's looking west. So the amount of light now coming in, but you can see here the original paint line, that's where the ceiling was coming down before. So over the windows and hidden. So really just trying to give, and that's the basement down there. So that's like a lot of love, I think, and a lot of warmth. And for wellness, it's pretty nice space to be in. And now just in action. This is just how this workspace on that ground level really starts to get used. And it's great to see programs really taking edge. And we can be here for talking about the green, environmental and sustainability, but also just to see people, connection and wellness. I think this is a very active space to bring people together. And yeah, just a few more photos of just the spaces in general. So that's it. Thank you.